Do you hear a sound and almost instantly see a specific color? You may be part of a special group of people, about 4% of the world's population, who can experience synesthesia. You're not imagining things. A new study shows that synesthesia is real, and it has brain scans to prove it. When these synesthetic people hear colors, scans show their brain parts for sight and sound are speaking to each other. Since synesthesia seems to be genetic, some researchers picked 3 families where this feature was present. They went on to play with DNA sequencing, comparing the genes of family members with synesthesia to those without. They still don't have the complete picture of this unique feature, but they did manage to narrow it down to some 37 possible gene suspects. Sometimes, after a nap in an uncomfortable position, you might have felt your arm or leg all tingly or numb. You'd think it all has to do with poor blood circulation. In fact, it might be due to a little thing called paresthesia. This is when your body starts experiencing unusual sensations because your nerves are squeezed or irritated. Paresthesia can give you anything from a burning sensation to that annoying feeling like your arm or leg is not responding at all. It might even throw in some itching or the good old pins and needles. Usually, it shouldn't take longer than 30 minutes tops. Give the affected body part a good shake and it might speed up the process. If it takes longer than that, or if you're getting repeated episodes of paresthesia for no reason, best to check with a specialist to make sure everything's okay. You know what's also worth checking? If you've already liked this video and subscribed to the channel, just to make sure you'll never miss anything. On a regular day, you don't even think about your stomach or its chemical content. Can you imagine if one day this substance just vanished? It contains hydrochloric acid, which is also used in fertilizers, rubber, and steel. Should you ever inhale it, you'd get some serious nose and breathing trouble. Whenever you're chewing something, your stomach starts working those gastric juices. They help because they can help break down protein, activate pepsin, get rid of whatever bacteria you may have swallowed without even knowing, and signal your food to move on towards the exit. Without the acid, the food would just sit there, turning into a bacterium breeding ground. Proteins and nutrients won't get absorbed. Your lunch or dinner might rush through your system as is, and you could end up eliminating undigested food. Ugh. There's a reason why paper cuts hurt so much. For starters, they happen on your fingertips, which are very sensitive areas. That's because they're full of receptors, which are like your body's receptionists, helping you determine the size, shape, texture, and temperature of the things you touch. When you get a paper cut, these receptors get instantly triggered, sending unpleasant information to the brain. Paper cuts also aren't like a clean slice from a sharp knife because of the dullness of the paper edges. This exposes even more of those receptors. Paper cuts don't bleed much and they don't clot well either. It leaves the nerves out in the open, making the discomfort even worse. We're always using our hands, so these cuts keep reopening, taking forever to heal. Paper is often treated with chemicals that can irritate your skin too. Déjà vu seems to just hit you out of nowhere. You're not a sorcerer and you're also not communicating with anyone from the beyond. It's just your brain malfunctioning. According to doctors, déjà vu is experienced when 2 parts of the brain are having a bit of a misunderstanding. These 2 brain parts are located on each side of your skull, right above your temples. They're like the memory cards of your brain, helping you remember things like locations or other people's faces. They even decode emotions and understand language. Now, in each of these brain areas called temporal lobes, there's a region called the hippocampus. This one is responsible for short-term memories. Sometimes the brain can get small glitches, confusing the hippocampus. That's when we get déjà vu. All this process messes with your recognition memory systems, giving you that weird feeling that you've been there before. Or you've already met a person you're seeing for the first time. This is a completely normal process, and you're more likely to experience déjà vu if you're between 15 and 25 years old. It also seems that people who travel a lot or have the ability to remember their dreams experience it more often. It's hard to imagine if a whole civilization could survive without anyone having sight. That's highly unlikely, and here's why. First, imagine trying to grow food when you can't even see what you're doing. Prepping the soil would turn into a nightmare, because without sight, we'd be lost in, say, a massive wheat field with no reference points. Gathering that little food wouldn't be easy either. Animals might be lurking everywhere, ready to harm us. Communication would be complicated, since we wouldn't be able to read something without touching. Even our social lives would be different. Without eyes, we'd be left to rely on voices. Talking to someone without knowing who else is listening. Creepy. If you've ever had a spicy pepper, you know it's not technically hot in terms of its temperature. So why does it feel like it's burning, even if it's just out of the fridge? Well, spicy food has these chemicals that trick your body into turning up its internal air conditioning. First, your lips and tongue feel like they're on fire. Then your nose starts to feel all runny, and you might even shed a tear or two. Your blood vessels dilate, and suddenly, your entire body temperature goes up. To cool things down, you start to sweat. Your lungs might participate as well and signal your diaphragm to pitch in some hiccups, all in an attempt to kick out the fiery intruder. In most cases, all these bodily triggers are caused by a substance called capsaicin, often found in hot peppers like habanero and cayenne. Even though we might feel like we're moving around in our dreams, we aren't because of a complex system in our bodies. This keeps your muscles from doing all sorts of outrageous things because of the wild stories our brains might be coming up with at night. It turns out that most of this brain chemistry happens during the rapid eye movement, or REM phase, about 90 minutes after you've fallen asleep. During REM, or REM, your brain is experiencing some of the weirdest dreams, while your voluntary muscles, like your arms and legs, are turned off. This muscle lockdown is the reason why some people wake up and can't move, experiencing what they call sleep paralysis. The big mystery was how the muscles got into this paralyzed state. Early on, scientists thought glycine, a neurotransmitter, was responsible. Research has shown that even if scientists blocked glycine, the muscles remained frozen. It took a while longer for scientists to find out that to keep those muscles immobile, you need both glycine and another communication chemical called GABA, or GABA. We're not as hairy as our ancestors, but we do still get little goosebumps when we're cold. It's because of these tiny muscles in our hair follicles, called erector pili, that pull our hair upright. For furry animals, this creature helps keep them warm. But for us, it doesn't do much in terms of heat. Still, we and some other less hairy creatures kept this ability over the years. Experiments were done to figure out more about these goosebumps. They found these three key players: those erector pili muscles, sympathetic nerves, and hair follicles. When they played around with the nerves, hair growth slowed down. The nerves and our hair follicles work like partners, making chemical synapses. So, goosebumps aren't just a quick fix to lower temperatures. They might also tell our stem cells to grow more hair in the long run. That's why losing those muscle cells could be linked to going bald.
If you're smelling something fishy at home and it's not your delicious salmon dinner, then it's time to check your electrical equipment. That stinky smell could mean your wires are frayed, your breakers are faulty, or your circuits are overloaded. And let me tell you, those plastic-coated wires emit a smell worse than a tuna sandwich left out in the sun. So don't be a fish out of water and get your electrical system checked ASAP. If you smell rotten eggs in your house, call the plumber straight away. The most obvious reason is the sewage and drain problems, such as contamination. But such a smell can also be produced if you've got problems with the water heater. Another possible problem might be a gas leak. Manufacturers add some distinct bad-smelling chemical to natural gas, so that people could notice even the tiniest gas leak on the spot. This one may not be as easy to spot as a unicorn in Central Park, but it's still important to know. Have you ever caught a whiff of something funky before your stove ignites? That's the smell of carbon monoxide. And let me tell you, it's no joke. This sneaky gas can be extremely dangerous if you inhale too much of it. And the worst part is that it's completely odorless and tasteless. That weird scent you're picking up, it's actually added to the gas to give you a heads up that danger is lurking. So, next time you catch a funky smell coming from your stove, don't just brush it off as last night's leftover lasagna. It's not uncommon to find mold in your home wherever water is present and trapped, like an unknown leak in the walls. Mold spores can grow as a result of this moist patch and can cause pretty serious health issues. Bedbugs have a thing for shoes. Yup, they love to hide in them, but only if the conditions are right. So if you've got a pair of shoes that you hardly ever wear, watch out. Bedbugs might just be snuggling up in there for a cozy nap. But don't worry, there's a trick to keeping those pesky bugs out of your kicks. Leather shoes are a bit too smooth for bedbugs to crawl on, so they're less likely to hide in those. Athletic shoes, on the other hand, are like a playground for bedbugs. All those interesting textures and patterns make for the perfect hiding spot. So if you want to keep bedbugs out of your shoes, just wear them regularly. Those creepy crawlers don't like anything that moves or gets disturbed often, and who knows, you might even squish a few of them in the process. Talk about a win-win situation. So go ahead, put on those shoes and show those bedbugs who's boss. Your feet and your sanity will thank you for it. If your nostrils are being assaulted by an unpleasant odor, it might be time to check your mattress. Recent scientific studies have revealed that a 7-year-old mattress can harbor more bacteria than a sci-fi movie set in outer space. Over 16 million colony-forming units per square inch. That's enough to make even the bravest of us want to sleep in a hazmat suit. But fear not, for there is a solution to this gross problem. Enter baking soda, the unsung hero of household cleaning. Simply sprinkle some of this magical powder onto your mattress, let it sit for half an hour while you go do something fun like watching cat videos, and then vacuum it up with a brush attachment. Voila! Your bed will smell fresher than a field of daisies on a spring day. So don't let those pesky bacteria get the best of you. And who knows, maybe your newly freshened mattress will even inspire some sweet dreams, or at least keep the nightmares at bay. Have you ever noticed that your towel smells like a swamp monster's armpit? Yeah, that's because you've been using it for too long. Don't be a bacteria hoarder. Switch out your towel after 3 uses. And if you really want to banish those stinky germs, toss in some baking soda every now and then. Your nose, and if you share an apartment, your roommates will definitely thank you. If your bathroom smells like a swamp, it could be because of stagnant water or some gross residue in the drain. Don't worry, if the plumber can't come until tomorrow, you can hack the smell by adding a few drops of your favorite essential oil to the toilet paper roll. It won't solve the problem, but at least you won't feel like you're suffocating. Now, onto the stinky toilet brush. Squirt some scented detergent right into the holder, or make your own DIY scent with distilled water and essential oil. It will get rid of bacteria, and the essential oil will hide bad smells. Just make sure you're allergic to the oils you choose. Moving on to the dishwasher. Did you know that mold can grow in there? Gross, right? Run a dry heat cycle with no dishes but some vinegar instead. Make sure to flush all the interiors, including the filters and panels. And if your silverware basket is looking a little moldy, soak it in some diluted antibacterial detergent before rinsing it thoroughly. Now let's talk about weird sounds in your house. Clicking and knocking in the winter or fall could be from turning on the heating or radiators. If there's condensed steam stuck in the system, try bleeding the radiators. And if you hear a bubbling sound, it could be a water leak or sediment in the water heater. Shut off the main water and listen. If the sound stops, call the plumber. If not, try draining the tank. If you're moving into a new house, check the walls and ceiling for any red flags. Fresh paint could be hiding something, so ask the landlord what's up. And stay away from popcorn ceilings. Not only are they ugly, but they contain asbestos. Asbestos is like a bowl of alphabet soup. It's made up of all these hard-to-pronounce crystal fibers: chrysotile, anthophyllite, tremolite, crocitolite, actinolite, and amosite. But don't let their wacky names trick you. Asbestos is one tough cookie. It can withstand high temperatures, chemicals, and even electricity. No wonder it was such a popular building material back in the day. Asbestos is like a sneaky ninja. It can break down into teeny tiny fibers that are so small they can float around in the air for days. And if you accidentally breathe in these fibers, it's like inviting a dangerous guest to your lungs. Yikes. So let's give asbestos the boot and keep our lungs happy and healthy. Just be careful if you're renovating an old home. You never know if you'll uncover a surprise layer of asbestos roofing. Odor-causing bacteria love to party in your kitchen sink and drain. And don't even get us started on the garbage disposal scraps. It's like a bacteria buffet in there. But there's a fun solution for you. Once a week, throw a party of your own by inviting 6 ice cubes, 1 tablespoon of baking soda, 3 thin lemon slices, and 1 teaspoon of bleach to the disposal. Turn up the music. Turn on the disposal and let those ice cubes do their thing. When the party's over, rinse with cold water for 30 seconds and voila! A fresh and clean sink. Your new sofa or cabinets could be secretly releasing some stinky gases into the air. Yep, it's true. These gases, called volatile organic compounds aka VOCs, can make your nose and throat feel pretty irritated. And if that's not bad enough, they can even give you a headache or make you feel dizzy. Yikes! But don't worry, I've got your back. If you can, try opening up some windows to get some fresh air flowing. And if you're on the hunt for some new furniture or home products, keep an eye out for low VOC options. Your nose will thank you. Plus, who wants to be surrounded by stinky furniture anyways?
No, you can't see the Great Wall of China from space. It's a cool myth, but it's still a myth and has nothing to do with reality. NASA confirmed it, and now you know it too. Still, the wall is a magnificent place, and you're lucky today. I'm taking you there, so fasten your seatbelts. We're going to China, the biggest Asian country, the 3rd biggest country in the world, and with over 1.3 billion people living there, is still the most populated one, even though India is getting closer and will probably take the first place soon. China is also one of the oldest nations in the world. It has 3,500 years of continuous written history, but the civilization existed long before that. Historians believe that China wasn't populated by settlers that came from somewhere else. The Chinese civilization most likely got formed from local Stone Age people who lived on the territory since the prehistoric period. So no wonder that the country is full of history and ancient landmarks, and I'll show you a couple. We are at the Great Wall. It's over 13,000 miles long, almost 5 times the distance between New York and Los Angeles, or a bit longer than the distance between North and South Poles. This is impressive, even today. Of course, it didn't take a day to build it. In fact, the wall was being built for centuries. Maybe you know that ancient cities had walls around them to protect the locals from the invaders? Yes, Chinese cities had them too. The first Chinese emperor united the country in 220 BC and got a brilliant but very ambitious idea to turn all city walls into one big wall that would defend the country's borders. So the process started. In the beginning, the wall was made of rammed earth and wood. Every next emperor would pick up the big wall project, strengthening and extending it, repairing, but also modernizing construction techniques. Some used brick to build the wall, some moved on to granite and marble blocks. Watchtowers and platforms weren't there from the beginning as well. They were added 19 centuries after the construction started. So the wall is quite inconsistent in terms of material, but it only adds more charm to the construction and shows how much effort and time it took. You can notice that some bricks have writing carved on them. They were left by the workers who were building the wall. The purpose of those writings is quality assurance. They contain such information as location, quantity, and responsible officials. So in case of problems with the quality of materials or constructions, it would be known who was responsible for that. Also, mind that the wall is poisonous. To prevent erosion of the wall by insects, arsenic, a poisonous chemical element, was used in construction. So better not lick it in case you had this weird urge. The construction stopped at the end of the 19th century because the wall lost its strategic and military importance in the world due to technological advances. Walls are way less efficient than they used to be, coming close to zero efficiency. So the construction lasted over 2,000 years, still making it the longest construction project in the world. Unfortunately, today the Great Wall isn't in the best shape. It's estimated that only 8% of the wall is in good condition, and the rest is considerably damaged. Also, around 1/3 of the wall has disappeared without a trace due to both natural erosion and human damage. Also, many bricks were taken away from it in the last century to use in building farms and homes. The wall is being deconstructed stone by stone even today, but this time by tourists. Quite a few of them take a stone as a souvenir. That's a total of a lot of stones, considering that over 50 million tourists visit the Great Wall every year. So we're not taking a souvenir from our today's trip, just preserving the memories. Let's now pay a visit to the Forbidden City. It's an imperial palace that took 16 years to build and was completed 600 years ago. To this day, it's the largest palace in the world. It has 980 buildings and over 8,000 rooms. Why forbidden? Well, centuries ago, ordinary people like you and me couldn't just walk the streets of that town, since it was considered a divine place and was home to the emperor. No one could enter or leave the city without the emperor's permission. Today, the Chinese more often refer to it as former palace, but of course in Chinese. I just can't pronounce that. The designs there aren't random at all. The details reflect the traditional Chinese architecture, and even the colors are chosen with the help of feng shui. The roofs of the city are yellow, which represents the supreme power of the emperor. Most walls and pillars of the city are red, representing fire, earth, and strong support. The floors there are made of so-called gold brick. These are not actual gold, but surprisingly, they are just as valuable. It's very hard to make them, and especially to copy the ancient technique. 2 original tiles from the Forbidden City were sold for 800,000 yuan. It's 115,000 US dollars. You can also see animal statues on roofs. Just like colors, animals have meaning in Chinese culture. Dragons, phoenixes, and lions are the most powerful ones. Dragons symbolize strength and good luck and are crucial for the culture. They appear everywhere, in idioms, legends, astrology, art, and so on. In ancient China, emperors were considered sons of dragons, so it seems like the Targaryens aren't the only ones after all. And ordinary people weren't even allowed to have items with dragons. As for a phoenix, in Chinese mythology, their rare appearance during the ascent to the throne of a new emperor is a good sign of harmony. In feng shui, it's also a symbol of luck, and when used correctly, it's believed to bring positive energy to the house. Lions signify strength and power. They always come in pairs, a male and a female, and they're the guards. The number of animal statues on the roof signifies the importance of the building. The city is made of wood, and without any nails used, they are considered violent, so they aren't welcome. You can imagine that a wooden city is a serious fire hazard. A little fire and the city with a 6th century history will quickly turn to ashes. So, fire prevention is taken very seriously there. The city has a whole bunch of firefighting equipment, and there's even a special fire brigade that knows the whole layout of the city better than their own apartment and watches the city every day. Walking around the city, you can notice something very unusual. No birds are sitting on the roofs here, ever. When it was built, the birds were taken into account, and the engineers constructed the roofs in a particular way to ensure that no bird can land and sit on them. The roof spines are wider than the width of birds' claws, and the slope of each roof is higher. Also, the roofs are made of slippery tiles, so the birds can't land there. What do they have against the birds? Well, this way the city stays cleaner and looks more magnificent. So, there are no birds, but there are over 100 cats in the city. They actually are an important part of this story. Some of these kitties are royal descendants. You see, 2 royal dynasties that lived in the city kept cats. The dynasties later collapsed, but the cats stayed in the city and have lived there ever since. Of course, some stray cats have joined the royalty over the years. But hey, no one minds it, and no DNA test has been made to see who's royal and who's not. After all, they all equally patrol the city, hunt mice, and possibly some stranded birds, and guard the city. So all cats are welcome.
Titanic sank on April 14, 1912, and all of the passengers' belongings and ship's paraphernalia went down into the deep, dark waters with it. These objects patiently waited to be discovered until 1985. Titanic sank fast, and there seemed to be almost nothing left from the ship. Yet divers in small submarines managed to retrieve plenty of artifacts from the wreckage. If you wonder what those surprising items look like, hey, join me. A number of museums have collections of Titanic items rescued by divers or donated by survivors and their relatives. And some of those items are even sold at auction. So if you're ready to spend a pretty penny on an exclusive artifact, hey, why not? The first artifact on my list is a pocket watch belonging to a Titanic passenger, John Chapman. John and his wife Elizabeth were on their honeymoon. When the ship hit the iceberg, Elizabeth was offered a seat on a lifeboat next to her friend Emily Richards. There was a problem though. Mr. Chapman couldn't enter the lifeboat. Elizabeth turned to her friend Emily and said, "Farewell, if John can't go, I won't go either." Now, that's what I call true love. After a short time, the ship went under. If we step back and return to Chapman's pocket watch, we'll notice one more heartbreaking detail. Experts believe the watch stopped around the time the ship finally submerged. Do you remember the iconic scene in the Titanic movie where the ship's band continued to play while the ship was sinking? The violin, played by the real musician, was sold in an auction for $1.7 million in 2013. They say the band played Nearer My God to Thee as the ocean liner sank. Since we started talking about the band, we might as well shed light on a piece of music found on the ship. It was the song Put Your Arms Around Me, Honey. Considering the fact that paper gets ruined almost instantly when it meets with water, it's a miracle to see those documents. Another saved paper document is the lunch menu. The first-class passengers wore their beautiful dresses and enjoyed their meals without knowing that it was their last lunch. This unique item was auctioned for $122,000. Meals were offered based on class. For instance, a first-class passenger would eat roasted turkey with cranberry sauce, spring lamb, or baked haddock. In comparison, a third-class lunch consists of stuff like rice soup, fresh bread, roast beef, and brown gravy. There were also cabin biscuits, which the passengers would eat to diminish seasickness. It wasn't just the menu. A VIP ticket was also retrieved. The ticket number is still readable, 1342. Number 5 is Edwardian perfume samples. A chemist named Adolf Saalfeld stepped onto the Titanic with various perfume bottle samples. Why did he bring these samples with him? Well, Saalfeld planned to open a fragrance store in America. 61 vials of perfume sank with the ship. Luckily, their owner managed to survive and get there safely, but his samples sank and were only rediscovered some time ago by the divers. When we accidentally drop a plate, it usually shatters into pieces. Now, there's a question. Do you think an unbroken plate can be recovered from Titanic? The answer is yes. Original White Star tableware is proof. Apparently, each class of passengers didn't just get different meals, but was also served with different types of plates. The retrieved plates have a green and brown floral motif. The edges have a gold rim, and there's a logo in the center. By the way, they're sold at auction, and you can find them online. Let's carry on with touching personal stories. The love story of Rose and Jack that we see in the movie is fictional, but the ship surely witnessed many romantic tales. Here's a love letter to prove this. The messages tell us a story about how life was on the ship during the last few days. It was written by Kate Buss on April 10th. She mentioned how seasick she felt and other things, such as she was supposed to go to dinner in a half an hour. This letter wasn't the only letter divers took to the surface. For example, there's the letter Esther Hart wrote to her little daughter Ava. It was sold at auction for £119,000. This letter is probably the last letter written on board, since it was completed only 8 hours before the tragedy. The letter is not that damaged because it was in the pocket of Esther's husband's coat. Another letter we can mention is Dr. John Simpson's letter. Those words were the last words that he wrote to his mother. Let me introduce you to Edith Rosenbaum. She was on the ship with her lucky toy pig. Edith had been severely injured in an accident before she sailed on the big ship. The toy was a present from her mother as moral support for her recuperation process. It was actually a music box in the shape of a pig. Edith used it to calm frightened young people in the same lifeboat. The next item on the list is the scout whistle of Lillian Winifred Bentham. She was a second-class passenger. On that terrible night, Lillian was in her stateroom. She didn't believe that the Titanic could sink. After all, it was the unsinkable ship. Her friend came to her and convinced her to hop into a lifeboat. Only then did she realize how serious the situation was. Moments later, she saw the ship break into 2 parts. As the lifeboat floated into the night, Lillian saw a crewman who was also rescued. Without a second thought, she wrapped the man with her fur coat. It was freezing, so she probably saved the man's life by doing that. The young man wanted to thank her for her kindness, so he gave Lillian a scout whistle. It was the whistle he used throughout the night to call for help. This pair of white gloves is one of the rarest artifacts recovered from Titanic. These cotton gloves belong to a gentleman. The owner's identity is unknown. Fabric can't last underwater for decades, but these gloves look fine, and you can still see the fine detailing and elegance. An alarm bell has also been found. Yes, that's the famous bell, the one that rang to warn people about the iceberg. Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were on lookout duty the night of the accident. Both of them survived. Fleet was the one who saw the iceberg before the ship struck it. What's ironic is that Fleet and Lee didn't have access to binoculars. They were stored in a locker in the crow's nest, but the key to the locker was in the pocket of a crew member who was reassigned to another ship at the last minute and didn't leave the key. They could have seen the iceberg sooner if they had had pairs of binoculars. If they had had it, the Titanic could have gotten out of the way. Divers discovered not just belongings of passengers or the crew, but also pieces belonging to the ship itself. Our next artifact is the Grand Staircase. Some parts of this iconic structure are recovered from the wreck. Turns out that this staircase became a meeting spot among first-class passengers. If they wanted to visit the Turkish baths for a spa day or eat dinner, they met at the staircase and went together. This staircase was a sign of how luxurious some parts of Titanic were. Another miraculously saved object that belongs to the ship is its plan. It was one of the most expensive artifacts sold at auction. The plan is around 30 feet wide. What else? The logometer was also discovered. It's a device used to check the sailing speed of the ship and the distance it covers. The experts say that from the start at noon on April 14th, the device logged 268 nautical miles. And there's more. A giant chunk of hull, known as the Big Piece, was also found. This fellow weighs 15 tons. The larger portholes were for the cabins, and the smaller ones were for the restrooms. This piece was found in 1994, but it was in 1998 when it was successfully taken out. After all these years spent underwater, it was swarming with sea life. Still surprisingly, the portholes still had glass. Now, let's assume you were a diver and you could only take out one of these objects. Which one would you pick?
Wakey wakey, it's time for another Victorian day. Meet Daphne, a typical Londoner of the 19th century. She and her husband John are ordinary Victorian people. Despite common 21st century rumors, they didn't marry young. Actually, back then, few people married earlier than at the age of 22. Getting up would be way easier if it hadn't been that cold in their house. Daphne and John aren't that well off, so they couldn't afford the Victorian-style central heating, which is a coal fireplace plus iron gates. Still, even wealthier classes who have it don't really fancy lighting that one, since heating is quite pricey. So the only thing to keep Daphne and her Victorians from Victorian permafrost is an old rug. Yeah, you don't want to step on the floor barefoot. To top all that off, due to the complete absence of in-room ventilation, the air in any Victorian house is often quite stuffy. So, the doctors advise opening windows overnight to let all the nasty smells out. Daphne usually wakes up alone as her husband is a factory worker and needs to be punctual. For that purpose, he uses the services of knocker-uppers. These guys wander the streets early in the morning and casually tap on the window panes. That's a pretty economical alternative to watches and clocks. For a fresh start in a stand-up makeshift shower each morning, all Daphne needs is a bowl, a slop pail, and a piece of cloth and some soap. The main ingredient is a jug of hot water to make the whole morning routine less stressful. Also, Victorian soap just won't lather in cold water. A nice hack. It's easier and warmer to wash your body part by part. As for a beauty routine, sure thing there were no nail salons. But even if there had been some, they couldn't have been very popular among working-class women. Rose-pink nails and soft skin were a badge of idleness, which wasn't fancy at all. On the contrary, Victorian noble ladies did have certain rules for their nails. No specks or ridges. The nails should be oval and no nail color was allowed. While ladies used lemon to keep freckles away from their hands, working-class women like Daphne opted for lard to soften up their skin. Daphne and many other Victorian women work from home. Nope, she doesn't have a dozen of Zoom calls each day, but she's pretty good at sewing, so she can work in pajamas just like many people do today. Unlike his wife, John works a 16-hour shift at a factory, and that's completely fine for the Victorian era. But if he were a lawyer, he'd work less, from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. The upper-class gents usually did their business from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Without a smartphone, John can't call an Uber, so he has to walk a whopping 4 miles to and from work each day. Instead of taxis, there were horse-drawn carriages. But such journeys could even hurt the people because of the lack of suspension. And the seats were small and uncomfortable. There were also horse-drive omnibuses. But passengers complained that whenever a horse suddenly stopped, they could be easily pitched off into the road. Hey, do you skip breakfast or hastily grab something before you go, just like John does? If so, it's something you have in common with Victorian workers. Their breakfast often depended on the reachability of their place of work. If it was an easy walking distance, they could share a hearty hot brekkie with their family. If not, the morning meal was quite fast and not that exquisite. Now let's make a short quiz for y'all on a typical working-class Victorian breakfast. A. An avocado toast with a smoothie. B. A croissant with a cappuccino. C. Bread and barley-based drink with foam. Yep, that was bread, or sometimes porridge, depending on the area in England, and that barley drink better known as beer, which was believed to be packed with vitamins essential for another hard day. Bonus, it didn't require cooking, sort of Victorian fast food. However, many people did prefer tea, plus coffee and cocoa started to gain popularity too. On the way to work, John got splashed by a carriage. I'll just go and change then. There's nothing better than to wear a fresh shirt with a hint of that flower-scented softener, he thought. Just kidding. There was no flower-scented softener. His wife Daphne never heard about a washing machine or softener either, and no one loved doing laundry back then. The main reason why people disliked it so much was because this basic procedure could take up to 3 days. Anyone who had an extra penny would definitely pay someone else to do it. Problem number 1. No hot water in the houses. Problem number 2. Whenever people heated water for their laundry, it impeded all the cooking in the house. No free space in the kitchen. The laundry always started with checking the clothes for holes to mend them before the vigorous process of washing. Then the clothes required some soaking. Saturday was typically a soaking day. This process could take ages, since some substances like mud could easily be dissolved in water, lucky John, and others needed more time. The only stain remover available was washing soda. By Monday morning, the clothes were well soaked and ready for washing. Some people used soap on spots where the grease concentrated, like collars, but soap was quite pricey. Next came dollying, wringing, and hanging the whole batch to dry.
At the very least, the clothes would be used again by Tuesday. This procedure applies to cotton. Things were somewhat harder with wool. And imagine having delicate clothes back then. Let's say corsets. Tight corsets, by the way, weren't that popular in the Victorian era. Yeah, some people in that era claimed a tiny waist was achievable only with a regular application of tight corsets, but women wore them not as a fashion statement. Victorian doctors believed that it was a corset that could help have a healthy posture, and that it could help keep the internal organs in the right alignment. Daphne is not a big fan of corsets, but she can sew you one. In Victorian times, the color of clothes sometimes depended on the laundry. The thing is, white clothes could be boiled and bleached better than those of bright colors, so the youngest ones were often wearing white to easily remove the stains if needed. The older they grew, the more intense colors they got. Fun fact, as a paler version of red that was considered to be a strong and masculine shade was intended for boys. Girls preferred blue colors instead. Around the 1940s, the situation changed and pink began to be associated with girls. Daphne often makes those pink and blue clothes too, and earns about 10 shillings a week, just like other seamstresses. With this money, Daphne could easily pay the weekly rent of 6 shillings. The rest she could spend on food or whatever she needed. With 1 shilling, she could buy enough tea for a week. 5 loaves of bread cost about 12 pence, aka 1 shilling too. Good news for vegetarians, 12 pence could get you about 18 pounds of veggies. A sack of coal cost about a shilling too. Now you understand why Daphne and John didn't have the fireplace. You don't want to literally burn your money. Also, for a shilling, John could buy a new outfit in case his old clothes didn't make it through a vigorous washing after a carriage splash. Going back to the facilities, what about toilets? Well, the first public toilet in England was opened in 1851, and there were even shown at the Great Exhibition that year. The Victorian toilets usually had S-bend pipes. Their purpose was to keep the odors at bay, as bad smells were believed to be dangerous for health, not to speak about nasal discomfort. But these were again a luxury. Ordinary flats and rural houses had something less comfy. Sorry, Daphne didn't reveal what kind of toilet she had. In the evening, there was of course no TV, or even light. As soon as the sky turned dark, it made no sense to stay awake. It actually cost a pretty penny. Candles and oil for lamps weren't cheap. Daphne finished another dress in the afternoon, so there was no point in burning a candle. Good night.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.